Now, most people I speak to have their savings in order, they've got their mortgage sorted, and they've got a rough understanding of their day-to-day expenses. But the key area which they're missing is their pension. So in this video, I'm going to talk you through roughly how much you should have saved in your pension for each age. Now, most videos you see online and most content that you might see is based on that being a multiple of your income, which is great as a starting point. The problem with that is it takes no account for the level of lifestyle you're going to have in retirement. So in this video, I'm going to talk through the exact figures that you want to be aiming for. But if you're new here, my name's Ben, I'm a qualified financial planner, and my aim is to help as many people as possible to get more clarity and confidence around their financial plan. Now, before I go through the figures, it's important to just note a few assumptions I made here. The key ones are I've assumed that your salary is £50,000. Now, clearly, this is slightly above the average for the UK currently, but I think that should give you a rough ballpark as to what you need to aim for. The other key assumption I've made is that you're contributing 8% into your pension each year. Now, that will be a combination of both your contribution and your employer's contribution. The other thing I've done is I've broken it down into 4 different levels of lifestyle: elite, good, okay, and off track. And what does this mean exactly? So typically when you come to retire, you want to try and aim for having about 60% of your working income as retirement income. So again, using my example of £50,000, if that's your current earnings, you want to be aiming for somewhere around £30,000 a year when you come to retire. This should mean you've got sufficient income to be able to afford your expenses and your current level of lifestyle once you come to retire. But what are the other categories? So elite is aiming to have 80% of your pre-retirement income in retirement. So again, 50,000 working, 40,000 in retirement. This is what I would say is you're going to have quite a luxurious level of lifestyle in retirement because, you know, for most people, their mortgage will be cleared, which is a massive expense for most people. So if you're at a point where you've got 80% of your pre-retirement income when you come to retire, you're going to be in a very, very good space. Good is that 60% I spoke about before. Okay is 50% of your pre-retirement income, which again, completely fine. Not quite optimal, but you're probably still in an okay place. And off track is anything less than 50%. Okay, let's start at age 30. And I think for most people, this is the first time they start to think about their pensions and take retirement a bit more seriously because, you know, let's face it, in your 20s, you're just starting your career, you're probably not earning a huge amount of money, and to be completely honest, you're just trying to get by day to day. And for that reason, it's very difficult to even think about your pensions at all. So age 30, what should you be aiming for approximately in your pension? So if you're aiming for an elite level of retirement, again, that's the 80% of your working income in retirement, you want to try and roughly have about £65,000 in your pension by age 30. Now, for most people, this is a complete pipe dream, and these people are going to be the ones that have had very generous employer contributions over the last 10 years or so. So there's going to be a very small percentage of people in this category. Good would put you at about £20,000. So again, if you've been working for the last 10 years or so, you should be able to be roughly at this point. Now, if you haven't got anything saved yet, then that's okay, because the good news is that you've got loads more time to be able to save into your pension before you get to retirement. So, okay and off track. If you've got nothing saved, you're probably okay at this point because you are so early on in the journey. So moving on to age 35, what does this look like? Now, by this point, you know, you're kind of midway through your 30s. You've probably got, you know, a higher level of income than you did maybe 5 or 10 years ago. However, you've probably got higher expenses as well because, you know, you may be married, you've probably got kids, you've probably got a mortgage. So there are a lot of other costs involved as you progress through your 30s. But what do rough benchmarks look like here? So an elite level of pension at this point would be anywhere around £100,000. And as I alluded to in the age 30 example, you're going to only be in this position really if you're getting very generous employer contributions, or if you've been planning for your pension for a long time and putting in more than that auto-enrollment level for the last 10 years or so. Now, a good pension pot at age 35 is anything around the £50,000 mark. You know, if you're at this point now, you are on for a good retirement. You've still got 20, 25 years to really make that money work as hard as possible and keep contributing. But if you're anything around that £50,000 mark at age 35, you're probably on for a good level of income in retirement. Now, an okay level of pension at this point would be about £20,000. Now, again, the good news is that you are still very early on, and you might not feel like it, but you have got a significant amount of time between now and retirement to be able to bolster that pension pot. And if you are at that level or below, then you're probably off track. And what you might want to do is think about how you can start bridging that gap. And at the end of the video, I'll talk through a few things you might want to think about if you are off track. Okay, moving to age 40. And I think for a lot of people, this is when they really do start to think a bit more seriously about their pensions. And the reason for this is because, by this point, you've probably got a mortgage, you're probably married, you've probably got kids that are, starting to grow up, and the costs involved with them are perhaps a bit less than they were in your 30s. So I think for a lot of people, it's a real time to actually think about how they can actually start thinking about retirement in a bit more detail and what they can actually do to start increasing their pension pot. So again, what does each level look like at age 40? So a good level of pension pot at age 40 is about £90,000. And again, this will put you in a good place because it means that currently you're on track to have 60% of your current income in retirement, which I said at the start is kind of what you want to be aiming for, because if you can get to this point, you are going to be in a very good place when it comes to retirement. If you're really aiming to have a high level of income in retirement and have that 80% that I spoke about before, putting you in the elite category, you're going to want to have about £170,000 saved in your pension by age 40. Now, again, for a lot of people, this is going to be, as I said before, where you've had very high employer contributions. But to be completely honest, this is very difficult to do unless you are probably in a position where you haven't got kids and you've really been able to focus on increasing those contributions through your 30s and into your 40s. Now, an okay pension pot would put you around £50,000 at age 40. Again, this is okay. There's nothing wrong with this whatsoever. I think the key thing with this is if you are below this, then you still have 20 years to make up the difference. So there's no need to panic because there are things you can do between now and age 60 to still put you in a really good place when it comes to retirement. Okay, moving on to age 45. And I think for a lot of people, this is, I suppose, the catch-up decade they move into, because if you are trying to get to the point where you can retire at age 60, which for a lot of people is something they really want to aim for and something that they, I suppose, really want to achieve, the next 10 to 15 years are a huge opportunity for you to be able to actually achieve that. So what do the figures look like at this age based on each level of income in retirement? So an elite level of pension would be about £250,000 at age 45. As I've said previously, very, very difficult to do this. In reality, this is going to be the minority of people, as I've said, probably the ones that haven't had kids and have been able to really hone in on their pension contributions. A good pension pot is probably somewhere around £150,000 at age 45. This will put you on track to have 60% of your current income in retirement, which puts you in a very good place. You should be mortgage free by this point, and therefore having that 60% of your income is going to put you in a really good spot when it comes to retirement. Now, an okay level of pension at age 45 is about £100,000. As I've said before, you've still got 10 to 15 years to really start to dial up those contributions and really make a difference. And that should put you in a much better place when it comes to retirement. Now, what I would say here is you are at a key point here, because for most people, it's probably the next 5 or 10 years when they are earning their most. So this should give you the, I suppose, capacity and ability to be able to start increasing those pension contributions. And that is really important, because if you start leaving it much later than this, it is going to be very difficult to get to a good space when it comes to retirement, because quite frankly, you do start to run out of time. So if you're 45 and you're thinking, I'm nowhere near that £100,000, you would need to start really thinking carefully about the sort of lifestyle you want to be living in retirement, because as I've said, the next 5 to 10 years are the key times really to start dialing that up and really thinking about your pension and retirement a lot more seriously. And finally, age 50. What does this look like? This is the point where your returns that you get on your pension are really starting to do the heavy lifting, because any point before this, you are probably at a point where the contributions you're making are making a bigger difference to the overall pension pot size than the actual return you're getting. So what does this mean exactly? So let's say, for example, your pension pot size is £100,000, for argument's sake. If you're getting, let's say, a 5% return on that each year, that's £5,000. For most people, you would hope they're contributing more than £5,000 into their pension. So when I'm saying the investment return is doing more of the heavy lifting, what I mean is that when you look at the total increase of that pension over a 12-month period, if it goes from £100,000 to £110,000, you've got £5,000 of investment return and £5,000 of your contributions. So the makeup of that is 50-50. When you enter into your 50s, that's the point really that most of the return starts to come from the investment return. So instead of your split being 50-50, you're probably going to see that start increasing to more like a 70% return from the actual investment return and 30% increase from your contributions. So the contributions you make from here on in are not going to make as big of a difference as they would have done in your 30s and 40s, but it's still really important to keep contributing and increase those contributions if you can. Okay, so what do the figures look like? So elite, you're looking about £350,000. Again, minority of people, you're going to be doing very well to be in this category at all. A good pension pot at age 50 is probably around £220,000 to £250,000. This will put you in a really good spot. At 60% of your pre-retirement income in retirement is definitely achievable if your pension pot size is at this level currently. An okay pension pot is going to be about £150,000. So this will put you at about 50% of your pre-retirement income in retirement. So again, using my example, if your income now is £50,000, you're on target to have an income of about £25,000 when you come to retire. Okay, so now we've gone through the numbers. How do you bridge the gap if you feel behind on those figures that I've gone through? Because, you know, some of you might look at that and think, I'm nowhere near any of those figures. I am now very anxious and very scared. So the good news is that the earlier you start putting things in place, the more chance you've got of actually being able to hit those target numbers. So what can you do if you do feel behind or if you are not at that level of pension at a certain age? So the first and most obvious one is to increase your contributions. Now, what I don't want you to do here is to go from, let's say, making a 5% contribution to making 15% contribution, because your budget will have got very used to you having a certain level of income. So if you suddenly start to increase those contributions too quickly, that's going to have a knock-on effect on your day-to-day expenses, which is probably going to give you more anxiety than you not having enough going into your pension. So what I would say is you probably want to look at increasing that by a percent a year. So let's say you're at 5% now and you're age 45, for example. What I would say is over the next 10 years, if you can increase that by 1% each year, that will put you in a really good spot. So over the course of the next 10 years, you go from contributing 5% now to 15% at age 55. And doing that just gives you a bit more of a buffer. It means that, you know, your day-to-day expense can, I suppose, adjust accordingly rather than having this massive shock of suddenly having, you know, £100 or £200 less each month. Now, when it comes to percentages, what is it you want to be aiming for, really? So what I would say is, firstly, this depends a lot on where you are now and what element or what bucket you're falling into. But a good rule of thumb is probably somewhere between 12 to 15% of your income going into your pension each year or each month. Now, again, this is a combination of both yours and your employer's contributions. So most people will be on a standard 8%. So that's 5% from you, 3% from your employer. For most people, this 8% just isn't going to be enough. And don't get me wrong, it's a really good starting point. But if you do want to get to the point of being able to retire before the state pension age, you do need to start increasing those contributions. So if you aim for between 12 to 15%, you're probably going to be in a pretty good place when it comes to retirement. Now, the other thing to bear in mind with all of this is that this is just based on your pension amount. So if you've got money in an ISA, for example, that clearly is going to be, I suppose, in addition to your pension. So when we're looking at these numbers, you probably want to try and factor in any money you've got in your ISA too. Clearly with the ISA, you can access this a lot earlier than you can your pension. So I would only include this number if you're actually genuinely keeping that ISA there for retirement, because, you know, if you've got it earmarked for university fees or school fees at some point in the next 5 or 10 years, then that money clearly is not going to be there when you come to retire. But if you've got money in the ISA and you're thinking, yeah, I can't see myself needing this, so I'll just keep it for retirement, then by all means, include that figure in the figures I've already discussed. Now, the final point I would say on this is review it each year, because as I said before, you need to, if you're really trying to take this seriously and actually get to a point where you can retire and have that financial freedom earlier than the state pension age, you need to really be dialed into those pension contributions. What I would say is each year, kind of review it, see where you're at, look at your budget. Can you increase it by 1%? If you can, great. If not, it's fine. But if you can increase it, then it's probably worth doing, because the more you can get in earlier, the much easier that's going to make it later down the line. Now, with all of this, it's progress over perfection, because you just need to keep those contributions going. And as I alluded to, when you get to your late 40s, early 50s, more of the return is going to come from the actual investment itself in your pension rather than the contributions. So if you can just stay consistent in your 30s, 40s, then when you get to your 50s, you're going to be in a really good spot for that to start working for you. So it means that the investment returns start doing the heavy lifting. The contributions are going to obviously increase that and help it grow, but most of it's going to come from the investment return. And what I would say is, you know, if you're 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, you're not too late. You've still got, even if you're 50 now, you've still got 10 to 15 years to really go hard and actually increase those contributions and put you in a really good place for retirement. It's never too late unless you stop. You just need to make sure that if you are behind or you feel you're behind, just start putting more significance and more importance on those contributions. Because if you do want to take this seriously and actually get to a point where you can retire, then you just need to make sure that's dialed in to get you to a point where you've got a comfortable level of income. Now, clearly with this, as I said at the start, it's based on a £50,000 salary currently. Some people will earn less than this, some people will earn more, but the figures should give you a rough idea as to what your income should be. Now, again, with the ages, clearly there are differences in that as well. So if you wanted me to go through, I don't know, a specific example based on your age or your salary, please let me know and I'll think about it for future videos. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please do like and subscribe to the channel, because I'll be posting more videos like this in the future, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.